Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the Twilight Zone Season 5, Episode 24. It's called What's in the Box. So spoilers for the episode. This one is about an older man, I'll say. He actually looked almost elderly to me, to be honest. But it's him and his wife living in a small apartment, and the TV's being repaired. But once the TV's repaired by a very, I'll just say, overacting TV repairman who's clearly up to something. The husband Joe starts seeing stuff on the TV, like basically things from his life from earlier in that day, and then eventually starts showing him things that are going to happen in the future. And it all revolves around the fact that him and his wife are fighting, and she's accusing him of having an affair, and it all bubbles up to a very kind of violent and ridiculous ending in a lot of ways. It's a very interesting episode to talk about, because I think conceptually I like a lot of what it's doing. I would say I was entertained by the episode as well. I don't know if I was always entertained for the reasons why it wanted me to be entertained. I think by the end of the episode, I was actually finding some of it darkly kind of funny, just because of how they handled a couple of things. But the gist of it is that the husband Joe is a cab driver. He always comes home late, right? That's sort of implied at the start when she's like giving him dinner and he's complaining that it's like doesn't taste that good because it's been ready for too long. And she's like, "Oh, you're always home late, probably chasing some skirt." And he's like, "No, some guy flagged me down and I had to take him off this long fare to Yonkers." And that kind of is how things start, whilst the TV's been repaired in the other room, and then the guy's repaired and says, "All right, it's done." The husband gives him some crap and tells him not to swindle him, that it's all a racket, he doesn't want to pay too much. And he's like, "Look, it's on the house, your TV's fixed," and off he goes. And then on the TV, we see that presumably just earlier that day, he was with another woman. He was with another woman in his car, and she's saying how much she cares about him. And then they're inside, like, presumably her place, her house, where she's trying to convince him to like leave his wife and marry her instead. The entire time this is happening, and this is very entertaining to watch, Joe, the husband, like the actor's performance, William Damarist, he's like in shock. Like his mouth's agape, he's like going up to the TV and he's like hitting it, and he's ready to like yell at his wife through, but then he realizes that she can't look at what he's watching, that something's not quite right. So he turns it off and he starts, acting a little bit freaked out. And they're bickering like from the start of the episode. So the wife just keeps saying things like, "Oh, you've lost the plot, you're crazy, you're this, you're that." One of the things that I've been talking about a lot recently is like how good the moment going into the ad break is. I do think this, like last episode, has a very good cliffhanger to go into the ad break, because it establishes that he's seeing stuff from his life, and it reestablishes that because when the wife goes back into the kitchen, he turns the TV back on and he sees the conversation that we started the episode with. We see them in the kitchen again having that first conversation about the food and about why he was late, and it's kind of establishing, oh, this is just like a little bit ago. And I wasn't sure what the premise entirely was yet, so I thought maybe it was always going to be an exact amount of time before. The idea that it's always going to be like an hour earlier or half an hour earlier or something like that. But the big cliffhanger before the ad break is that he turns on the TV, because he's wanting to watch wrestling. That's what he keeps saying that he wants to watch. And he ends up watching a little bit of it, but he gets too curious and he has to go back to Channel 10, which is the one that's showing all the, well, his life. And when he watches Channel 10, he now sees something that's not happened yet. And it's basically a fight between him and his wife that starts off feeling quite dark, because she's up against the wall and he like goes to punch her and she moves out of the way. But when he punches the wall, we can see that his fist is already bloody. And that felt quite dark for a Twilight Zone episode. I was like, oh, this is going places, right? I was kind of feeling something. What's weird though is that the rest of the fight scene actually ended up being kind of funny, mainly just because of how they film it and like how angry and like comically they're both yelling at each other. At one point, he like hits her over the back with a chair that falls apart, and it's like a classic like saloon chair like falling apart in a bar fight kind of thing. And she's barely fazed by it, right? And they're chasing each other around the room. She's throwing things at him, vice versa. And then the ending of it is ultimately that he punches her and she's like standing in front of the window. So we get this insane and it's a very funny shot. Like, it's weird to say that because obviously it's a man like punching his wife out of the window, which is killing her. But the way she goes flying back out the window screaming is funny. It's like comical. It's like a cartoon almost. And I don't know if like they wanted it to be a little comical or if it's more just if we played this straight, like what it actually is. It's this brutal fight that leads to a murder between a married couple. That's too dark for 1960s like network TV. So we have to give it this like air of cartoony comedy around it to just get away with doing it. But either way, it definitely makes it feel a bit of like a weirder tone. I cannot deny though that I was entertained the entire time. So points for sheer entertainment value, I was enjoying my time with it. And the end of the before the ad break is him just sort of like the TV like goes to static and he starts like sobbing and the wife comes through asking what's wrong and he's just distraught, and that's when it fades to black and goes to the commercials, which I actually think was a great like cliffhanger. It was like, okay, rule of threes. He watches the TV once, he sees something that happened earlier that day, and it's something that reveals that what his wife's been saying about him having an affair is true, so it's character advancement for the audience as well. Then the second time, it shows us the conversation from the start of the episode, and that's good because it establishes that it's accurate, right? It reaffirms it for him, right? And it reaffirms it for the audience, but the important thing for the audience is that it proves what we saw the first time was true. That it wasn't just like what his wife thinks or something like that. Because you could have interpreted it a bunch of ways if you wanted to. But this confirms, no, him with the other woman earlier was a real thing that happened that day, because what we're seeing now, we know happened at the start of the episode. And then the third time the TV's on, we see this vision of the future, which is a dark, violent end. A little funny, but dark and violent all the same. Great cliffhanger. Honestly, as far as the first half of an episode goes, you couldn't ask for more. You really couldn't. It sets things up. It gives you a sense of the characters, and it gives you a big hook to come back to after the ad break. And that's not to say that I think it goes downhill in the back half that much either, really. It's just that it's never going to be as tightly paced as that. Especially since one of maybe the slight downfalls of this episode is that when we do get to the fight in the second half of the episode, it's largely just watching the same scene again. Like, a good like minute and a half maybe of the exact same footage effectively just playing out again. There may be a couple of little extra bits, but it's pretty much just saying the same thing again. But there's a doctor here because he fainted after the whole TV thing, and he's like, hey, he's probably delusional. Maybe he watches too much TV and he's having trouble separating reality from what he's watching. Which, I get what it's doing there, and it feels like maybe it's poking at a theme with that, this idea, especially since that he was watching wrestling and that's what he wanted to watch, so he ends up in a literal wrestling match with his wife later on. I feel like though the bigger theme for me in this episode is more about just guilt and shame, because it feels more like he's being haunted by the fact that he's actually having an affair, and then he's haunted with the fights that this is leading to with his wife, and then he's scared of what he's going to do to his wife at the inevitable conclusion. And maybe that's part of it as well, is that there's like a inevitability that he's created that he's aware of that is now terrifying him. And he tries to amend that. Like after the doctor leaves, the wife comes in and he's like, hey, sit down, I want to talk to you. And she's like very hesitant because they don't have heart-to-hearts. They don't seem like that couple. He's like, hey, this has all made me realize that you're the one I love. And he almost admits to having an affair. Like he kind of half says it at one point where he basically says he's choosing her over someone, but then doesn't kind of finish his sentence. But she gets it. She knows that's what he's saying. She flies off the handle and starts packing a suitcase and saying she's going to leave him. She's giving him the best years of her life, and that's, where we're all bubbling up to. And of course, you can kind of see where it's going at this point, is that he's now getting angry because she's acting like this. So it starts to go and go. And the big thing that kind of gets him riled up is that when she goes out into the living room with her suitcase, she turns the TV on, right? And she puts it to channel 10, even though the episode makes it clear she can't see anything on this channel. It's just static. So it really sells this idea that it's really just in his head. Even though there was a TV repairman that seemed to like cause this, who even shows up at the end to kind of like go, "Oh, is your TV working well?" as he's getting carted off by the police for the murder of his wife. But it's yeah, she turns the TV on and he hears the sound of the TV, but what he hears is the court case where he's been sentenced to murder for the murder of his wife. And he comes out yelling about it, and he's staring at the TV. He's seeing himself being given this sentence, this lethal sentence, and he punches the TV, which turns out to be how he gets the blood on his fist at the start of the fight. But it's when he punches the TV where it escalates and it turns into the fight that we saw before. And it plays out exactly as we saw. And then after she goes out the window, police bust in with some neighbours who have clearly been concerned with all the noise. And he gets taken away. And I think if I have a complaint or something that just feels like a little bit of a letdown, is that I was expecting just a little bit of something else at the end. Like, the fight plays out the way we already saw it. So I was thinking there was going to be an extra little hook or an extra little irony right at the end, and there wasn't. It just kind of like, oh, he's been taken away for this crime like we knew he was going to. Which, I mean, there's some dramatic effect to that. Like, I get the kind of the, like, no, it panned out exactly as he saw. It was inevitable, and now he's going away for this crime. Like, I can appreciate that to an extent, but it kind of felt like the first half of the episode was so good at introducing new things and getting exciting because of it. And then the second half, it introduced, like, okay, we're obviously going to build up to this fight. It doesn't feel like a fight that happens like years in the future or even weeks in the future. It feels like something we're going to see by the end of the episode. And it does. And it happens in a very kind of convincing way. But I was just kind of expecting that there might be some other little element to it after the fact. Like, I was almost expecting it to like just sort of like snap cut to like him sitting there in bed or something, or on the couch, and like the idea that the whole thing's just played out in his head or something like that. And I'm not saying I would have liked that as a better ending necessarily. I was just expecting something that kind of shook up what we'd actually been seeing the entire time. But honestly, aside from that, I found this very entertaining. Like, I think the characters are a little bit over the top, and they're very cartoony with how much they hate each other and all the constant yelling. The reactions to seeing his own life, but particularly his own lie, his own guilt on the TV, the thing that he can't let his wife see, was very fun and entertaining. And the way that he like has to sort of block the TV and sort of lie about the fact that he was yelling about how they got Channel 10 a second ago. The fight itself is comically over the top and very entertaining as well. Honestly, it's a pretty solid episode as far as fun goes, which is really weird because it feels like it should be a really dark episode. And it kind of is in a way. Like, when you stop and actually think about what we've seen in the episode, it is kind of dark when you actually just say what it is. But the way it's handled just has this like sense of humor to a lot of it, I found. Again, I'm not sure if that's like an intentional thing where they wanted it to have a bit of a dark comedy vibe to it. Although I would argue the way the TV repairman is kind of mugging at the camera as he's like being ominous about like repairing the TV would suggest that there is like a bit of an intentional sense of humor here. Like I say, the first half stronger than the second half, but the second half still has a good build to the actual fight happening, and like him like getting his final like thing that he sees in the TV being his ending, and him like aggressively going towards that anyway is you know, I think that made for a satisfying sort of message as far as like his character goes. He's not willing to change in his ways in any way, shape, or form. And that's including for the other women as well. Like he when we see that quick scene of him with his like mistress, if you want to call her that, he basically just makes up excuses for why they shouldn't get married and says, no, marriage is for chumps or something. You know, he makes excuses to keep things the way they are. So it's very much you know, he made his own bed kind of episode, almost like a little Tales from the Crypt, I guess, in that way you could say. It wouldn't feel that out of place if it was on that show instead of this one. I have no idea what the consensus is in this one, if people are into it or not, but I had a good time. So that is the show. That is the episode. Thank you very much for joining me. Let's have a look and see next time on Twilight Zone. Rod was excited about the actors. It's an episode called The Masks. Here's the description on IMDb. Wealthy Jason Foster is dying, and he invites his greedy heirs to a Mardi Gras party. That was the other thing Rod was very excited about, was being in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, where they must wear the mask he specially had them made, or else be cut off from their inheritance. Okay, so my assumption from reading that is that the masks are supernatural and they're going to either be permanently attached to their face, or it's going to make them do something bad, or something, or it'll reveal who they really are. I don't know, but it feels like there's, I'm definitely getting some vibes. It's very highly rated in IMDb, this one, though, so consider me a little excited about it. So we'll see how that is next time. But thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And, help keep the lights on. The financials, money, all that stuff. But that's me. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.